Hello everyone, today we will be talking about ASEAN from class 12 Political Science. The content is purely from class 12 NCERT. Now ASEAN, which is also known as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So the abbreviation of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations is ASEAN. What constitutes the Southeast Asia? So the region where you see Philippines and your Singapore, Thailand, all that region includes the Southeast Asian nations. When these nations come together, they form the association, which is known as Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Right now we'll be talking about what led to its formation, so the background content we're going to understand. The common thing about all of these nations were that they were repeatedly colonized by the Europeans, by the Japanese. Now this repeated colonialism led to economic backwardness, and there was a question or there was a problem for the nation building of these nations. Also, there was a constant pressure to these nations to align with the Western world or the Western ideology of capitalism. These were some major issues or major problems or the major background that we need to understand. First, repeated colonialism by Europeans and Japanese, which led to economic backwardness, and then they faced the problems of nation building, and there was also constant pressure from the West. So, there was the unity of, or the third world unity, to organize it into an association such as the Bandung Conference and the non-aligned movement. But all of these were ineffective for establishing the conventions for informal cooperation and interaction. So neither the Bandung Conference nor the non-aligned movement were capable to set up association for the informal cooperation and interaction. So you have to note this thing. It was supposed to be informal, the convention to establish the conventions for informal cooperation and interaction was supposed to be informal. So now we come to the part when and how it was established. We need to remember the year. In 1961, the ASEAN was formed in the year 1967. It was formed by signing the Bangkok Declaration. Bangkok is the capital of the country, Thailand. So initially there were 5 founding members of ASEAN. So they signed the Bangkok Declaration, and finally ASEAN was established in 1967. It was formed by these 5 major founding countries. You can learn it by the abbreviation PMSET. So it's Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia and Thailand, which formed the ASEAN. So PMSIT, PMSET. Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia and Thailand. So in this one page, we have discussed about the background information, that the context of how the ASEAN was formed. Let's revise it quickly. Repeated colonialism by Europeans and Japanese, economic backwardness, problems of nation building, and constant pressure to align with the West. This was there. Side by side, you see the Bandung Conference and the non-aligned movement was found to be ineffective in establishing the conventions for informal cooperation and interaction. So finally, it was established in the year 1967 by the Bangkok Declaration. Next, we move on to the objectives of ASEAN. It was formed, but what was its major objective? So there were 2 major objectives. There was one, a primary objective, and second was the secondary objective. The primary objective was to accelerate economic growth and through that social progress and cultural development. This was the primary objective of ASEAN, which was to accelerate economic growth, and by accelerating the economic growth, they wanted to ensure the social progress and the cultural development. Second was to promote regional peace and stability. Regional peace means in that particular region they want to maintain peace, they wanted to ensure stability, and this peace and this stability was to be ensured or was to be based on the rule of law and the principles of the United Nations Charter. These were the two major broad objectives of ASEAN. Let's revise that. Primary objective was to accelerate economic growth and through that social progress and cultural development. And the secondary objective was to promote regional peace and stability based on the rule of law and the principles of the United Nations Charter. So initially, as we saw, there were 5 founding members of the ASEAN, which was PM said, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand. Then later on, Brunei Darussalam, Vietnam, Laos, PDR, Myanmar and Cambodia also joined, and currently there are 10 member states of ASEAN. Next we see that EU, we call EU as a supranational structure or institution. But unlike the EU, so ASEAN did not want it to become like EU, which is a supranational structure or an institution wherein it considers itself to be the nation and its member states to be particular states of a country. Instead, ASEAN countries have celebrated what has become known as the ASEAN Way. One way is a form of interaction, right? An interaction which is informal, which is non-confrontationist, and which is cooperative. ASEAN Way is nothing but it's just a form of interaction that has to be informal, that is non-confrontationist, and that is cooperative. And here they also ensured that there is respect for national sovereignty, which was critical to the functioning of ASEAN. This is just the crux, or this is what it's written in your NCERT, so we'll keep it short and crisp. ASEAN Ways was nothing but just a form of interaction which was informal, which was non-confrontationist, and which was cooperative, and they also ensured the respect for national sovereignty, which was critical to the functioning of ASEAN. Next, so we talked about the objectives of ASEAN, wherein we talked about the primary objective of ASEAN and secondary objective of ASEAN. The primary objective, if you remember, was to accelerate economic growth and through that social progress and cultural development. Secondary objective was to promote regional peace and stability. I hope you remember this. So ASEAN just did not cater to these objectives, whereas it broadened its objectives. It broadened its objectives beyond the economic and social sphere. So if you see accelerate economic growth, which is the economic aspect of the objective, through that social progress, cultural development, peace, stability, which is the social sphere. So it does not limit itself to economic and social sphere, whereas it broadened its objective beyond economic and social sphere. So what happened that in the year 2003, now this is something very important and the major part of ASEAN focuses on this part that we're going to study now. In the year 2003, what happens is that ASEAN, in 2003, ASEAN community is being established. Okay, so in 2003, ASEAN community is being established and it has 3 major pillars. So these 3 major pillars are ASEAN Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. Let's move on to the ASEAN Security Community first. Now, ASEAN Security Community was based on the conviction that outstanding territorial disputes should not escalate into armed confrontation. This was the basic and the major idea about the ASEAN Security Community, that whatever conflicts you have, whatever territorial disputes you have, it should not lead to armed confrontation. There should not be the fight with arms and ammunitions. So these disputes should not escalate into armed confrontation. This was the first major point about the ASEAN Security Community. It was just based on this conviction only. The second point is that the ASEAN, the member states of ASEAN, they had made several agreements and they promised within themselves to uphold peace, neutrality, cooperation, non-interference, and respect for national differences and sovereign rights. This is the second major point that you need to remember in the ASEAN security community, that the member states of the ASEAN, they had made several agreements and they promised to uphold peace, neutrality, cooperation, non-interference, and respect for national differences and the sovereign rights. 5 points you need to remember. Let's just revise once. We noted the objectives. We noted that these 10 states joined in. Then we talked about the ASEAN way, which is the form of interaction that is informal, non-confrontationist, cooperative. There has to be the respect for national sovereignty, which is critical to the functioning of ASEAN. Then we talked that it has broadened its objectives beyond the economic and social sphere. When in the year 2003, ASEAN community was established, 3 main pillars. We are talking about the ASEAN security community at the moment, wherein it was based on the conviction that the outstanding territorial disputes should not escalate into armed confrontation. And the second point was that ASEAN states have made several agreements and the member states promised to uphold peace, neutrality, non-interference, cooperation, and respect for national differences and sovereign rights. Then we are talking about the ASEAN Regional Forum, which in short is known as ARF. So either they will in the question they might write just ARF, so you should know the full form of ARF, that is ASEAN Regional Forum, which was established in the year 1994. Okay, now it is an organization that carries out the coordination of security and foreign policy. That is just what is written in your book, so we'll keep it till here only. Now this particular organization, it's going to coordinate among the security and foreign policies of various states. That's it what is written in the book. Also, one more thing I need to mention here is that this is just a one short quick revision which you can have before your exam. If you want to understand it in detail, there will be a separate video for that, but it's just we are skimming through the contents and we're just revising it for a one short revision series like that. Now when we talk about the ASEAN Economic Community, so the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, so when we talk about the Southeast Asian nations as a region as a whole, so we'll see that this is much smaller than the EU and the US. EU, there is European Union. So what these organizations, when we compare it with, it's very smaller, but what makes it different and what makes it stand apart, and the probable reason why we are studying it here, is that its economy is growing much faster. So when we say that its economy is growing much faster, so the objectives of this is that to create a common market plus production base within ASEAN states and to aid social and economic development in the region. So ASEAN Economic Community is a part of the ASEAN community that was established in the year 2003. And it is one of the pillars of the ASEAN community. So when we say economic community, so its major focus is on to create a common market and production base within the ASEAN states. Like we talked about the NCERT, Myanmar, Cambodia, all of these nations. So here we need to create a common market, that we have a common market and we have a common production base so that we can aid the social and economic development in that region. This is the first objective. The second objective is to improve the existing ASEAN dispute settlement mechanism to resolve the economic disputes. Because this is the economic community, so we should have a mechanism, that ASEAN dispute settlement mechanism is there, that we improve this so that we are able to efficiently resolve the economic disputes. Third is that it focused on creating a free trade area. So free trade area we have to create for investment, for labor, for services. This is the 3 major categories. Let's quickly revise them. So ASEAN community के जो objectives है, the first one is to create a common market plus production base within ASEAN states to aid social and economic development in each region. Second is to improve existing ASEAN dispute settlement mechanism to resolve economic disputes. And third, it is focused on creating a free trade area for investment, labor and services. Next, we move on to other part of the chapter of this topic, that is ASEAN is a very important regional organization, because when we talk about its Vision 2020, so in the Vision 2020, it defined itself as an outward-looking role for ASEAN in the international community. It mediated the end of the Cambodian conflict, the East Timor crisis, and it meets annually to discuss the East Asian cooperation. And third is that it encourages negotiations over conflicts. So these are all the things that you need to remember, and just as we are revising, so we'll quickly finish this up. So now, India signed a trade agreement with Malaysia, Singapore and Thailand. And last part of this topic, the significance of this, that is the only regional association in Asia provide a political forum where Asian countries and major powers discuss the political and security concerns.